Hello and welcome guys to another video where we talk about the carbon markets, about carbon credits investing, how to make money in carbon. As always, if you enjoy content like this, please make sure to like and subscribe. We're building an incredible community here. This leads me to my next announcement. I have launched a Discord channel where we can exchange ideas about the carbon markets and about how to invest in carbon, interesting projects, interesting companies. And there's also the Facebook group where we do the same. So make sure to check it out. The link is in the description. Today we're going to talk about the compliance carbon markets, the mandatory carbon markets. What is a compliance carbon market? Well, here's the definition. Compliance carbon markets are marketplaces through which regulated entities obtain and surrender emissions permits, also called allowances or offsets, in order to meet predetermined regulatory targets. So how does it work? Well, let's say that the government of country X sets a limit for CO2 emissions. That means that every company in a certain sector can only emit a certain number of CO2. Let's take an arbitrary number of 100 tons of CO2 per year. So company A is an electricity company which burns coal and produces 150 tons of CO2 per year. Company B is an electricity company that has a lot of wind turbines and produces only 50 tons of CO2 per year. So this is great for company B. The government grants company B an additional 50 tons of CO2 per year allowances, which company B can either sell on the open market or store for future years when they plan or expect to emit more CO2. But this is bad for company A. Remember, the limit was 100 tons of CO2 per year, and company A produces 150 tons of CO2 per year. That means that company A has to find allowances for 50 tons of CO2 per year to offset their emissions. Company A can either buy emission allowances on the open market, or it can develop CO2-friendly projects to get additional credits. So what kind of additional credits are allowed in these carbon markets? Well, usually it orientates itself, as for the voluntary carbon markets, on the clean development mechanism. But some carbon markets like the EU have banned the use of international carbon credits to offset the emissions. So only domestic credits are allowed. This incentivizes companies to use more climate-friendly technologies. This is a very basic example of how the compliance carbon market works. Compliance because it's mandatory. The rules and regulations are mandatory for the companies. If they don't comply, they have to pay a fine. There's not one compliance carbon market. There are many different carbon markets around the globe. Here you can see a map of carbon prices. Countries that have an emission trading system in blue and a carbon tax in red. So there are a lot of countries and or regions that are implementing a compliance market. So you can see the EU ETS system, the biggest, in the European Union, Canada, China, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Switzerland, and certain regions of the United States, for example. There's also the CORSIA, the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. This is basically the compliance market for aviation, although it's not the same as the other country compliance markets. And because of the massive reduction of flying in 2020 and 2021, this has been put on some sort of a standby. So like I said, there are many different carbon markets around the world, and each one acts independently of each other. The revision of Article 6 at the COP26 climate conference should facilitate cross-border trading. We'll see how that goes. We will look at the European Union emission trading system because it's the biggest, we could say most sophisticated market. Also, I live in the EU, so interesting to me. The EU ETS has been in place since 2005. It's a cap and trade system. That means, as I explained before, a cap is set for certain industries and the cap is reduced over time, a cap of CO2 emissions. And within the cap, companies that pollute less receive carbon offsets, and companies who pollute more have to buy carbon offsets. And since the regulatory body controls the cap and the issuance of allowance, this is a highly bureaucratic market, a highly government intervention market. And there are a lot of things that go wrong all the time. There have been a lot of scams concerning carbon certificates, but it's getting better. But the regulators are interfering a lot in what could be an actual market. So what kind of industries are included in the EU ETS, for example? Well, first and foremost, electricity generation, and it's also iron and steel production, refineries, cement and lime production, glass, ceramic and brick production, as well as paper and cellulose production. So industrial processes most of the time. In 2013, they added chemical industry and some more metal industries. And in 2020, they added the gas industries like nitric oxide and fluorocarbon. So this is mostly big industry. And we can see that the price from 2017 has gone up, straight up in 2020 and 2021. So it's getting more expensive for the industry to emit CO2. So that means they have to find a strategy to reduce their CO2 or to find good credits. So as more as the price goes up, the more the demand will go up. But like I said, the EU ETS is not the only carbon market in the world. It's the biggest one, and other markets, newer markets, are modeled after it. So I cannot say with certainty that every market has the same. They seem to have a similar procedure, but there are regional differences. But the compliance market is at the moment for electricity production and heavy industry. And there's also a lot of government involved in it. Unfortunately, if you're a private investor, you cannot directly participate in this. You have to buy the ETFs. You cannot directly buy carbon allowances. If you're a professional investor, you can access the carbon market, the European carbon market. This can be done, for example, on the European Energy Exchange. So what do you guys think about compliance carbon markets? Does your country have a market? And what do you think about the future? Do you think we will be able as private investors to participate in these markets? Let me know in the comment section. And as always, I thank you very much, and we will see each other in the next video.